It started with a sentence that no billionaire was ever prepared to hear. Pick someone else. I've been returned 3 times. Those 8 words cut through Lucas Hale like glass. The man who built empires with algorithms and steel nerves froze in front of a 6-year-old girl in a wheelchair with galaxy tape wrapped around its rims. He didn't expect his first meeting at a small adoption center in Queens to feel like standing at the edge of a cliff, but that was exactly where he found himself. If this story moves you, already stay with it. What happens next will break, then rebuild your idea of what saving someone really means. Just that morning, Lucas had stepped out of his penthouse overlooking Central Park, another day scheduled down to the second. His driver waited, the markets were opening, and his phone flashed with messages from investors. But something heavier than profit sat on his chest. A year earlier, his sister Anna had died in a car accident while he was closing a billion-dollar merger in Tokyo. Since then, success had tasted like rust. The papers called him the boy genius who turned guilt into gold. They were half right. He told no one where he was going that day. He traded his tailored suit for jeans and a hoodie, took the subway like he used to when he was a broke kid from the Bronx, and walked into St. Catherine's Family and Adoption Center without the armor of money or reputation. The receptionist blinked in disbelief before checking her notes. "Mr. Hale, we weren't expecting." "Just Lucas," he interrupted, voice low. "I'm here to meet Maya Rivera, Dr. Nisha Patel." The caseworker led him down a quiet hallway lined with children's drawings, crayon houses, lopsided rainbows, hearts bigger than faces. "She's had a hard time," Dr. Patel said. 3 placements, 3 returns. She's bright artistic, but she doesn't trust easily." Lucas nodded, though his stomach clenched. He'd come here to help, maybe even to atone. He hadn't imagined a child carrying more emotional armor than he did. When he saw Maya, the world seemed to narrow to a single frame. She sat beneath a sunlit window wheelchair, angled slightly toward the courtyard. Her hair was a wild halo of dark curls. A small turtle plush rested on her lap. She didn't look up until he spoke. "Hi, Maya, I'm Lucas." She inspected his sneakers, then his face as if cataloging whether he was built to last. "They told me you build things," she said, "apps and robots or something." "I build ways for people to connect," he offered. She shrugged. "People always connect until they leave." Her voice wasn't bitter. It was factual like the weather. Lucas wanted to say something clever, reassuring, adult. Nothing came. The silence that followed was heavy, but Maya didn't fill it. She looked past him toward the garden and added, almost to herself, "I'm easy to push but hard to keep." Dr. Patel cleared her throat, ready to redirect, but Lucas knelt beside the wheelchair. "Do you mind if I sit here for a bit?" She gave a small nod. They talked about turtles, about how the night nurse's radio played old jazz about why the clouds sometimes looked like continents. For the first time in years, Lucas wasn't performing. He was listening. Then Maya said it the words that would haunt and remake him. "Pick someone else. I've been returned 3 times. Once because I cried too loud. Once because the mom said I reminded her of her own kid who died. The last one said she was tired." She lifted her gaze. "I don't want you to get tired." Lucas felt his breath catch. All the noise of New York faded, the horns, the buzz, the ego of the city. "I don't get tired easy," he said quietly. "You will," she answered, voice small but sure. "They all do." He tried to smile, but his vision blurred. He turned his head, blinking hard. He had cried at funerals at Anna's empty apartment, but never like this, never, because a child spoke truth so clean it stripped him bare. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You didn't do anything," Maya said, hugging her turtle. "I just don't want anyone to promise they'll stay when they won't." Dr. Patel placed a gentle hand on Lucas's shoulder. "She doesn't say much to most people," she murmured. "That's saying a lot." Lucas knotted his throat thick. Yeah, he managed. It's saying everything. The meeting was supposed to last 15 minutes. It stretched past an hour. When he finally stood, Maya was drawing on a scrap of paper a stick figure with a round head standing next to a small wheelchair under a crooked sun. She held it out without looking at him. "You can take it," she said, "so you don't forget what I look like when you change your mind." He took the drawing carefully, as if it might dissolve. "I'm coming back," he said. Maya didn't answer. She just wheeled herself a few inches toward the window, sunlight spilling across her knees. "People always can," she murmured. "It's the staying that's hard." Lucas made it to the hallway before breaking. He pressed his hands against the cold wall, breath ragged. The weight of every deal he'd ever made felt meaningless next to a 6-year-old girl teaching him the cost of abandonment. When Dr. Patel joined him, he didn't bother wiping his face. "Teach me what she needs," he said. "Medical stuff, care, whatever it takes. I want to learn." She studied him, uncertain whether he meant it. He met her eyes. "I'm not here for charity. I'm here to stay." Outside, the city kept moving, indifferent as ever. But inside that modest building in Queens, something had shifted. The billionaire who thought he'd seen everything had just been undone by a child who'd seen too much. And for the first time in years, Lucas Hale wasn't thinking about saving anyone. He was thinking about staying. The first time Lucas Hale drove back to St. Catharines after meeting Maya, the city looked different. The glass towers that had once mirrored his confidence now felt like barriers, cold and unreachable. He'd spent the night reading everything Dr. Patel had emailed: medical notes, therapy schedules, evaluation reports, but none of it prepared him for the quiet ache that settled in his chest. He didn't know if he was trying to help Maya or if he was trying to forgive himself through her. At 40 floors above Manhattan, his penthouse office buzzed with strategy meetings and investor updates. But even there, in the high hum of success, he kept hearing her voice: "Pick someone else." It wasn't accusation, it was exhaustion. The words clung to him like smoke. That week, Dr. Patel allowed a follow-up meeting, this time inside the small art room at the center. Lucas came dressed in simple clothes again, sleeves rolled up, sneakers scuffed from pacing the sidewalks outside. Maya was at a low table, covered in colored pencils. She didn't look up when he entered. Her hair was tied in 2 uneven braids, and the same turtle sat beside a new drawing, a house with an open door and no people inside. "Hi, Maya," he said softly. "I brought the plantain chips, both kinds." She glanced up, expression unreadable. "You remembered." "I try to remember the important things." She looked back at her drawing. "That's good. People forget faster than they promise." Lucas sat down across from her. "Dr. Patel says you like painting. I like it when no one watches," she replied, shading the sky a bruised purple. "Then pretend I'm not here." She paused, then started again. "That's easy," she said quietly. "Most people already do." Lucas felt that line like a strike across the heart. But he didn't try to comfort her with words. He just opened the bag of chips, slid them toward her, and began drawing on a scrap of paper himself, clumsy lines, a stick turtle wearing a tiny superhero cape. When he held it up, Maya tried not to smile, but the corners of her mouth betrayed her. Dr. Patel, watching from the doorway, whispered to an assistant, "She's never smiled with a new visitor before." Later, over coffee in the center's break room, Dr. Patel explained more. Maya has spina bifida. She manages most things herself, but transitions are hard. The medical care is expensive, the emotional part even harder. 3 placements fell through. One family didn't understand the hospital visits. Another couldn't handle the therapy schedule. She stopped calling anyone mom after the second return. Lucas listened in silence. Does she know that she knows everything Dr. Patel said? She listens for what adults don't say. Lucas nodded, eyes down. I want to understand what her days look like. Her routines, her meds, her triggers. Dr. Patel raised an eyebrow. You're serious. Serious enough to show up? He said. Teach me. For the next few weeks, Lucas returned quietly, without cameras, without PR. He learned how to adjust Maya's wheelchair harness, how to fold her therapy brace properly, how to distract her when the physical therapist stretched her legs until her eyes watered. He learned her schedule morning meds, school sessions, drawing hour music therapy. Every evening he'd sit by his window, overlooking the city lights, replaying her words. The markets moved, his company thrived, yet the only progress that mattered now was when Maya allowed him to push her chair without flinching. One Saturday, Dr. Patel arranged a small field visit. Maya's file called it Community Reacclimation, an hour outside the center with a trusted visitor. They went to Central Park. The sky was a lazy blue, the kind that made people forget the noise of the city. Lucas pushed her chair slowly down the path, careful not to rush. Maya wore a wide-brimmed hat that kept slipping sideways, and every time he adjusted it, she rolled her eyes, but didn't protest. A saxophonist played near Bethesda Fountain a deep, soulful tune that made Maya tap her fingers against the armrest. That song sounds like walking, she said. Lucas smiled. You know you've got a rhythm. Maybe you'll dance one day. She shot him a look that was all defiance. Maybe you'll stop trying to fix things that aren't broken. He laughed softly. Touché. They stopped for ice cream vanilla for her, black coffee flavor for him. When he crouched to hand her the cone, a pigeon startled nearby, and Maya's chair tilted slightly over a small curb. Her face went pale. The cone dropped. Lucas caught the handles before the chair tipped further, steadying it with both arms. She froze, her breath, shallow eyes glassy. Hey, he said, gently, still crouched. You're okay. You're safe. She blinked hard, jaw tight. Don't say that word, she whispered. What word? Safe. Her voice cracked. Everyone says that before they go. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Lucas stayed where he was, one hand still resting lightly on the wheel. Okay, he said finally. No more promises, just ice cream. He picked up the cone, wiped off the melted edge with a napkin, and handed it back. Second chance. This time, she took it. By the time they returned to the center, she was humming faintly under her breath, the same jazz tune from earlier. Dr. Patel caught Lucas in the hallway. She doesn't hum for anyone, she said. I didn't do anything, he answered quietly. I just stayed. That night, Lucas wrote an email to his board of directors. He told them he was taking an indefinite leave to work on something real. The PR team panicked, the investors questioned his sanity. But for the first time in years, Lucas didn't care about optics. He was done being a symbol. He wanted to be human again. Days turned into a rhythm. Therapy visits. Story time. Sketches pinned to the wall. Maya started greeting him with half smiles instead of silence. Once, when he asked if she liked superheroes, she shrugged and said, They always fly away. I like turtles. They stay. And in that small confession, Lucas saw the entire map of her heart. She didn't need saving. She needed someone who would stand still long enough for her to believe he meant it. He left that night knowing something had shifted permanently. The man who once measured life in profit margins was now measuring it in minutes spent beside a little girl who laughed at trumpet ducks and hated the word safe. Lucas Hale had entered her world thinking he could fix it. What he didn't know yet was that she was quietly rebuilding his. The headlines came first. Young billionaire plays savior at Queen's Adoption Center. Lucas Hale's new charity project. A child in a wheelchair. The photos were grainy. One captured him crouched beside Maya in Central Park, Another caught her smile at the edge of the frame. The internet did what it always did, turned something fragile into a spectacle. The comments were worse. Publicity stunt, guilt trip with good lighting, let the man buy redemption if he can afford it. Lucas didn't read them all, but the few that reached him hit harder than he expected. He had spent years controlling his image, building a legacy of clean wins and sharp headlines. Now, all he wanted was to disappear from them. Yet, when Dr. Patel called that night, her voice calm as ever, she didn't mention the media. Maya saw the news, she said. She asked if you were famous. He closed his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose. What did you tell her that you used to be? It was the kindest possible truth. Lucas decided the only way to drown the noise was to act, not talk. He bought an old brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, not the glossy kind that made magazines, but one with chipped steps and a backyard full of stubborn ivy. He told contractors to widen the doorways, add ramps, and install an elevator chair between floors. When they asked about the budget, he said, "Build it like someone you love will live here." He began spending less time at the office. His CFO threatened to step in before you tank the stock. Lucas barely heard him. His calendar filled instead with meetings at Mount Sinai, sitting with pediatric specialists who talked him through Maya's long-term care plan. He took notes like a man preparing for an exam he refused to fail. Dr. Patel noticed. "You're doing a lot for someone who hasn't even been approved for placement yet." Lucas smiled faintly. "You don't build a bridge after the storm starts." When he told Maya about the house, she didn't look impressed. "Everyone says things before the papers are signed," she said, coloring a turtle on her art pad. "Promises are like paper shields. They get wet easy." "Then we'll make ours waterproof," he said. She didn't smile, but her crayon paused mid-stroke. "You think that's possible? I think we'll find out." The field visits continued. Sometimes he'd push her through the botanical garden. Other times they'd sit at a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and rain. That's where they met Grace, a retired nurse who worked the morning shift, and Marvin, a wheelchair basketball coach with arms like steel and a grin that could light a room. Over time, they became part of the rhythm, small witnesses to something forming between Lucas and Maya that didn't need words. One Thursday morning, Lucas found a note taped to his office door. It wasn't from his staff. It was written in uneven handwriting with purple ink. "You forgot to sign my turtle drawing." Underneath, in smaller letters, "People who stay should sign things." He laughed aloud in the middle of a silence that startled his assistant. That night, he drove to the center and found Maya reading by the window. "You have a point," he said, handing her a pen. "Where do I sign?" She pointed to the corner of the page. "Not on the turtle, on the sky. That's where promises go." He signed LH in small, careful strokes. She nodded solemnly. "Okay, paper shield, maybe, less paper now." Still, the world outside didn't quiet. Reporters camped near the center, questions about motives shouted across the fence. Dr. Patel tried to shield Maya, but she sensed the tension. One afternoon, as Lucas arrived, Maya asked, "Are you going to stop coming when they tell you to? Who's they?" "The people who write things." He crouched beside her chair. "Maya, the only story I care about is ours, and you get to help me write it." That seemed to reach her. She leaned closer and whispered, "Then spell my name right." He laughed, a sound that felt new coming from him. By early summer, the adoption process had entered its slow, bureaucratic grind. Home visits, background checks, court filings. Lucas handled every form personally. The lawyers warned him that high-profile applicants often faced extra scrutiny. "They think money makes people impulsive," one said. "They'll test you to see if you mean it." "Good," Lucas replied. "They should." Meanwhile, Maya began asking different kinds of questions, smaller, sharper ones. What's your favorite smell? Do you ever get scared of the dark? If I can't walk, do you still think I can dance? Lucas answered each one carefully, not because she needed perfection, but because she needed truth. One afternoon, she asked something that stopped him cold. When people get adopted, do they forget the ones before? He thought for a long moment. I don't think forgetting is part of love, he said. I think it's the opposite. It's remembering without hurting so much. She studied him. You talk like you've practiced that. Maybe I have. Dr. Patel saw the change in both of them. She's starting to trust you, she said after one of their sessions. I'm starting to deserve it, he answered. On a rainy Tuesday, Lucas arrived at the center with something new, a small whiteboard and a set of colorful markers. These are for you, he told Maya. For the days when words are heavy, you can draw instead. She tilted her head. Or you could learn sign language, she suggested. Just in case I don't want to talk at all. He blinked, surprised. You know some, she said, fingers flicking quickly. Thank you. He copied her motion awkwardly. She giggled. You just said banana. Guess I'll need practice. He grinned. Good thing I'm a tough teacher. That evening, Lucas drove home through the rain, the city lights bleeding into streaks across his windshield. For the first time since Anna's death, he didn't feel haunted. He felt anchored. Maya was teaching him that love wasn't about grand rescues or picture-perfect endings. It was about the slow, ordinary work of showing up day after day until showing up became the promise itself. He parked in front of the brownstone and stared up at its windows. The renovations were nearly complete. Inside waited an elevator chair, a lower countertop, and a bedroom painted sky blue with a space for a small wheelchair by the bed. He imagined Maya's laughter filling those walls. For the first time in years, the idea of home didn't feel like guilt. It felt like grace. The night before the court hearing, New York felt heavier than usual. Rain slicked the sidewalks. Traffic lights blurred like bruises across the wet glass. From his office window, Lucas watched the city pulse below, relentless, alive, indifferent. He'd built his empire on control, on numbers that never lied. But now, as thunder rolled over the East River, everything he'd learned about power meant nothing. Maya's future hung on a stack of papers and a few people's judgment of his heart. The call had come that afternoon. A former foster family had filed an objection. They claimed Maya had behavioral instability and difficulty bonding. Words written by strangers who couldn't handle her courage disguised as defiance. It was enough to freeze the adoption process until a judge reviewed it. Lucas listened in silence, his pulse hammering against the edge of his composure. Dr. Patel's voice over the phone was steady, but her words landed like blows. You'll need to testify, Lucas. They're questioning your motives. Motives. That word burned. He thought about the headlines, the cynics, the cameras waiting for him to fail. For the first time in years, he was terrified not of losing money, not of reputation, but of losing a child who finally trusted him not to leave. That evening, he went to see Maya at St. Catherine's. She was by the window again, tracing raindrops down the glass with her fingertip. They told me, she said before he could speak. Her voice was flat. You can't take me home. For now, he said carefully. It's just for now. She turned to face him, eyes fierce. Did I do something wrong? No, he said quickly. You did everything right. Then why do people keep deciding what happens to me? She asked, and there was no anger in it, only exhaustion. I thought you were different. He knelt in front of her wheelchair, struggling for words. I am different, he said. But sometimes the world isn't. She looked away, jaw set. It's fine, she said, her voice suddenly small. You can stop trying. It's easier that way. Her words hit harder than any boardroom betrayal. "Maya, look at me," he said, but she didn't. "I'm not going anywhere. I meant it. People always mean it," she whispered. That night the storm worsened. Lucas drove without destination, the wipers thrashing against sheets of rain. He ended up near the Brooklyn Bridge, parking beside the railing, the skyline rising like a heartbeat across the water. The wind howled, tugging at his coat. He leaned on the cold metal rail and let the rain soak through. He thought of Anna, her laughter, her accident, the way he hadn't been there when she needed him. He thought of Maya's face when she said, "You can stop trying." He realized he'd been fighting battles that money couldn't win, and this one required something he'd avoided for years: vulnerability. He took out his phone and called Dr. Patel. "I want to testify," he said. "I already planned for that," she replied. "But it's not about image, Lucas. You'll be questioned about your past, your losses. They'll dig, then let them," he said. "They can't take away what's real." The next morning, the courthouse on Center Street was gray and echoing, full of voices that carried too easily. Maya sat beside Dr. Patel, her small hand gripping the turtle plush. She wore a red sweater, the one Lucas had given her after their first trip to Central Park. When their eyes met, she didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. That was enough. The hearing began. The foster couple who had filed the objection spoke first. Their words were polished, distant. They described emotional outbursts, difficulty adapting, and manipulative behavior. Lucas wanted to stand up and shout that they were talking about resilience, not rebellion. But he waited. When it was his turn, he took the stand, hands, steady voice low. "I'm not here because of guilt or headlines," he began. "I'm here because a 6-year-old girl taught me what love looks like when it refuses to quit." He paused, scanning the courtroom. "You want to know my motive? It's not charity. It's not redemption. It's staying." The opposing lawyer leaned forward. "Mr. Hale, you're a billionaire. People will say this is a vanity project. What do you say to that?" Lucas looked at Maya. Her eyes were fixed on him, silent but strong. "I say they've never met her," he said simply. "Because if they had, they'd know this isn't about saving anyone. It's about learning how to show up for someone who stopped expecting you to." For a moment, the courtroom was still. Even the clerk stopped typing. When the hearing ended, the judge said she needed time to deliberate. Hours later, as Lucas waited outside in the corridor, Maya wheeled up beside him. "You talked a lot," she said, her tone half teasing, half relieved. "I do that when I'm nervous," he admitted. She nodded. "You didn't sound nervous." "I was," he said. "You make me brave." Rain had started again by the time they left the building. The sky was a blur of silver. Lucas pushed her wheelchair toward the car, but halfway down the steps she stopped him. "If they say no," she asked quietly, "will you still come back?" He bent down so they were eye level. "If they say no, I'll come back tomorrow. And the day after that, until they say yes." She studied him for a long moment, the way only she could, measuring truth like a scientist. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, then I'll wait." That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. The city glowed through his window, rain tapping against the glass like fingers asking for attention. He looked at the sketch Maya had made weeks earlier, the 2 stick figures under a crooked sun, and realized something all his life he'd been building walls to keep control, and now the dam was breaking. But instead of drowning, he felt free. When the phone rang at dawn, his chest tightened. It was Dr. Patel. The judge made her decision, she said. Her voice trembled slightly, the first crack he'd ever heard in it. She approved the placement. "Lucas, it's done." For a moment he couldn't speak. He sat on the edge of the bed, breath shaking, eyes wet. Outside, the rain began to lift, sunlight threading through the clouds. He whispered the only words that came to him. "We did it, Maya. we finally stayed. At St. Catherine's later that morning, when he arrived to tell her Maya didn't need the words. She saw it in his face, the way people recognize home before they even step inside. She didn't cry. She simply reached for his hand and said, "Took you long enough." He laughed, tears spilling freely now. "Yeah," he said, kneeling beside her. "But I'm not leaving again." The day Maya moved in the city seemed quieter, as if New York itself had paused to take a breath. Lucas Hale stood by the window of the brownstone, watching the slow approach of the white van from St. Catherine's. It was early spring. The trees along the street were just beginning to bloom, their petals drifting across the sidewalk like soft confetti. He'd spent months preparing for this day, designing, renovating, planning, but nothing had prepared him for the tremor in his hands or the way his heart stuttered when the door opened. Maya rolled down the ramp wearing a denim jacket over a yellow dress, her stuffed turtle perched proudly on her lap. "You live here?" she asked, her eyes sweeping over the house. "I do," Lucas said, "but it's about to be our house." She stared up at the tall windows and the climbing ivy, her face unreadable. "It looks old," she said finally. "Old means it's seen a lot," he replied, "and it's still standing." Dr. Patel stepped out behind her carrying a folder and the kind of smile that held both pride and relief. "I think you'll like the backyard," she said to Maya. "It's full of sunlight." Inside, the brownstone glowed with quiet life. The walls were painted in soft cream, the furniture simple and sturdy. Lucas had learned that comfort didn't need to be expensive, it needed to be intentional. Maya's room was upstairs, sky blue, with stars painted across the ceiling and a window that faced the garden. She wheeled inside slowly, her eyes wide. On the desk sat a framed photo of the two of them in Central Park, taken secretly by one of the nurses during a music hour months earlier. She looked at it, then at him. "You kept this. I keep everything that matters," he said. For a while, she didn't say anything. She reached out, touched the photo, then looked back at him with a small, tentative smile. "Then, I guess I matter." "You always did," he said, and this time, she didn't look away. The first few weeks were quiet, full of adjustment and learning. The nurses came by in the mornings, helping with her routines and therapy. Lucas joined in awkward at first, then slowly finding rhythm holding the wheelchair. Steady, learning her medication schedule, figuring out how to make breakfast exactly the way she liked it. She didn't like scrambled eggs but loved pancakes with too much syrup. Every time he overdid it, she'd laugh and say, "You're bad at pancakes but good at trying." Their days fell into gentle patterns. Mornings in the garden, afternoons reading by the window, evenings spent drawing or watching the world through the wide glass. Lucas had installed a small elevator chair between floors, but she still insisted on pushing her own wheels most of the time. "I don't want the house to forget it's mine, too," she said, grinning. By summer, the garden had become her favorite place. Together, they planted daffodils and sunflowers, Maya carefully tucking each bulb into the soil. "This one's Anna," she said one morning, patting the earth gently. Lucas froze. He hadn't told her about his sister, not really. But Maya had a way of sensing things that weren't spoken. "Anna's a good name for a flower," she said, looking up at him. "It sounds like something that comes back every year." Lucas swallowed hard. Yeah, he managed. She always did. In August, Maya started attending art classes at a community center nearby. Lucas would drive her there every Tuesday, waiting in the corner while she drew. The first week, she refused to share her work. The second, she handed him a sheet filled with swirling colors and said, "This is what quiet looks like." He studied the image, a mix of gold and blue and soft gray. "Looks like peace," he said. "Same thing," she replied. By fall, their home had grown louder music, drifting through open windows, laughter echoing down the hall. Grace, the retired nurse from the diner, became their regular dinner guest, and Marvin, the wheelchair basketball coach, started teaching Maya how to shoot hoops in the backyard. "You've got arms made for it," he told her. "Strong where it counts." She grinned and said, "Like turtles." One evening, after everyone left, Maya found Lucas sitting in the garden, a cup of coffee cooling beside him. "Do you still miss her?" she asked quietly. He knew she meant Anna. "Every day," he said, "but it doesn't hurt like before." She nodded, thoughtful. "Maybe that's what love does. It stays even when it changes shape." He smiled faintly. "You sound older than me." "I've been practicing," she said, then leaned her head on his arm. "You're doing okay, you know." Winter came softly that year. They decorated the house with paper stars and painted snowflakes on the windows. One night, Lucas found Maya sitting by the fireplace, drawing in her notebook. "What are you making?" he asked. "A letter," she said without looking up. "For who? For me," she said. "So I don't forget this part." He didn't ask to see it, but later that night after she'd gone to bed, he found the page left on the table. In her uneven handwriting, it read, "Dear me. It's okay now. You don't have to be brave all the time. Some people stay." He folded it carefully and kept it in his wallet. A year passed. On a bright spring afternoon, they stood together on the High Line, the city stretching endlessly around them. A butterfly, pale blue and trembling, landed on Maya's wheel and lingered. She watched it quietly. "That's Anna," she said softly. "She found us." Lucas looked at the sky and smiled. "Yeah, she always finds a way." The following week, Maya's school hosted an art showcase at Lincoln Center. She'd been working on her piece for months, but refused to let Lucas see it. When the curtain rose, her painting filled the screen behind her, a large, vivid canvas of a turtle with galaxy-colored wheels, a man and a little girl standing beside it under a field of stars. The title read, "Staying." The applause was thunderous, but Maya's eyes were on him. After the show, she handed him a folded paper, the corners smudged with paint. "It's my new resume," she said, "in case anyone asks what I can do." He opened it. "I can laugh again. I can love. I can stay." He didn't say anything for a long time. He just pulled her close, his voice catching as he whispered, "You forgot one." She looked up. "What you can teach," he said. "You taught me how to stay too." That night, as they drove home through the city lights, Maya leaned her head against the window. "Hey, Lucas." "Yeah, don't pick someone else." He smiled. "Never." In the quiet that followed, the streets glowed the world, humming softly around them. It wasn't the sound of wealth or power or redemption. It was the sound of two lives finally learning how to breathe in the same rhythm. The daffodils would bloom again. Soon the turtle would keep its place by the bed, and the house that once echoed with silence would keep filling with laughter. Love hadn't replaced the pain. It had rewritten it. And in that rewrite, both of them finally found what they'd been missing. Not a miracle, not a rescue, but the long, bright after. In the end, Lucas Hale, the man who once measured life by numbers and headlines, found meaning not in fortune, but in the quiet act of staying. What began as a visit to an adoption center became a journey of healing for both him and Maya Rivera, the little girl who refused to believe in promises until someone finally kept one. Together, they built more than a home. They built a space where pain learned to live beside joy, and where love meant showing up even when it wasn't easy. Maya's laughter filled the silence his guilt once owned, and Lucas's patience gave her the one thing she'd never had before: permanence. The story of Lucas and Maya reminds us that redemption doesn't come from grand gestures or perfect endings. It comes from presence. You don't need to be wealthy to change a life. You just need to stay when it would be easier to walk away. In a world that celebrates instant success and quick fixes, this story asks us to slow down, to listen, and to love with intention. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe and join our community. Your support helps us share more stories that heal, inspire, and remind us of the power of staying when it matters most.